Hey guys, tonight we're slipping through a crack into Minter, the velvety dark of ancient Rome, where the wind smells like warm stone and old olives, and soft rain patters on the tiled roofs of sleeping villas. You hear it tap, tap, tapping like the sound of forgotten thoughts returning. You push open a creaky wooden door. Inside, there's a quiet study with rolled scrolls stacked on a marble table, a low fire casting gold shapes on the walls. You weren't invited, but it doesn't matter. The only other person here is long gone, left behind only the scent of candle wax and a handful of half-formed thoughts that survived centuries. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's drifting off with me around the world. Don't now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sink into the stone bench near the fire, where the rain softens into a lullaby. You reach for the nearest scroll, tied in worn red thread. It smells like old papyrus and ambition. In fading ink, someone has written a question. What is the good life? You chuckle softly. No pressure, right? Just the ultimate question posed 2,000 years ago by people wearing sandals and suspiciously little deodorant. And yet, something about the quiet seriousness of the space makes you lean in. Maybe they knew something we'd forgotten, because right now, you've got a to-do list glued to your brain and a phone, somewhere that's still buzzing from an email that didn't deserve to exist. And yet, here in this flickering midnight refuge, you have permission to forget all that this Stoics believed was the right time for philosophy. Not in the lecture halls or the marble forums, but in the middle of the night, when it's just you, your mind, and the occasional spider. The Stoics didn't come out of nowhere. They were born from chaos, literally. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, only got into philosophy because he shipwrecked and lost everything he owned. He wandered into a bookshop in Athens, read about Socrates, and basically said, okay, I guess this is my new thing now. Historians still argue whether Zeno's early lectures took place in the Stoa Poikile because of its popularity or simply because it was covered, offering shade. What's certain is that it gave the school its name and its reputation for being calm, collected, and extremely allergic to nonsense. So here you are, on a Roman night, surrounded by the bones of an empire. The flicker of the fire dances across the bust of some long-dead senator. Maybe he was wise, maybe he was corrupt. Maybe both. Stoicism never promised that people would be easy to categorize. Rainwater pools gently in the courtyard outside, like thoughts that refuse to leave you alone. But as you breathe slower, deeper, you notice something odd about the silence. It's not empty, it's full of a kind of waiting, like the walls themselves are listening. You remember a phrase from Marcus Aurelius, scribbled in his personal journal, not meant for anyone's eyes but his own. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Yikes, bit heavy for a bedtime story, isn't it? But maybe it's the weight that helps. You realize this was a man who commanded armies, but couldn't command the future. So instead, he trained himself to command his mind. The Stoics believed that external events, fame, fortune, sickness, even death, were all outside your control. The only thing that really belonged to you was your reaction, your attitude. It's like they were trying to build a mental bunker, not to hide from life, but to survive it with grace. To meet tragedy and say, ah yes, my old friend. Come in, take a seat. I was expecting you. Tonight, in this imaginary villa, you're learning to do the same. You're not trying to fix your feelings. You're learning to watch them, to let them knock, rattle the doorknob, then wander off into the night without letting them. Rearrange the furniture in your head. You smile a little as the rain picks up again. It's okay, let it rain. Let the world outside do what it wants. Fun fact, elite Roman homes often had impluviums, shallow pools built right into the center of their houses to catch the rain, not to stop it, not to hide from it, but to receive it. That's the Stoic secret, whispered in marble courtyards and cracked scrolls. Don't chase comfort. Build resilience. Let life pour in. Collect it gently. And while we're here, did you know ancient Romans sometimes used powdered mouse brains as toothpaste? Just thought you should know. Stoicism is great. Hygiene was ... evolving. You shift your weight slightly on the stone bench. Somewhere nearby, a cat knocks something over, possibly a priceless vase. You sigh, very stoic of you. In the distance, the thunder rolls, low and tired. You imagine Seneca, scribbling one last letter by candlelight. Marcus Aurelius, muttering philosophy into the chill before dawn. Epictetus, cracking a half smile at the absurdity of life, and you, breathing in the stillness. Your mind for once not reaching for the next thing, not solving, not fixing, just noticing, like the rain just falling. You're still in the villa. The fire's dimmed to embers now soft, pulsing red like the memory of warmth more than the warmth itself. And yet you don't move. You feel strangely anchored, like the floor has stopped spinning under you, and you can just ... be. Your fingers graze another scroll on the table. This one feels heavier. Maybe because it carries the weight of someone who tried to live every day, like it might be their last, but also managed to sound deeply sarcastic about it. Seneca, the man of 1,000 contradictions. He was a wealthy statesman who preached simplicity, a stern philosopher who secretly wrote bawdy tragedies, and an advisor to Emperor Nero who definitely got some things wrong, like say, trusting Emperor Nero. Historians still argue whether Seneca's suicide was truly voluntary or forced by the paranoid emperor. But the letter he left behind reads like someone writing the world's calmest goodbye text. Stoicism, apparently, teaches you how to bow out gracefully, and when your student is literally setting Rome on fire tonight, you imagine yourself sitting across from Seneca. The candle between you flutters like it knows secrets. He looks tired, sure but focused. This is a man who has stayed up to many nights thinking, and now he's ready to talk. You're angry, he says, but does that help? You blink. Not the conversation starter you expected. Anger, Seneca believed, was one of the most destructive emotions, mostly because it tricks you into thinking you're in control while actually controlling you. His famous essay on anger basically says, rage is like a dog that looks obedient until it bites your guests. You think back, maybe someone said something today, something small, stupid, sharpened you, let it live in your head rent-free for hours. Or maybe it's an old anger, something crusted over with time and disappointment. Seneca's advice, you can't stop the first spark, but you can stop pouring gasoline on it. He would write long letters to his friend Lucilius about this often. At night, sometimes while sick, occasionally while trying not to get executed. And yet, every line feels like it's aimed right at you in 2025. Lying awake with your jaw clenched and heart rehearsing arguments that will never happen, in one of his letters. He wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." You close your eyes. Let that one sink in, because yeah, the world can be rough. Bills are due, people disappoint, traffic exists. But often, it's the replay button in your mind, the one that loops your worst moments at 2 a.m. that truly messes you up. Seneca's trick. He practiced imagining the worst-case scenario deliberately, not to scare himself, but to train himself. He called it premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. So if you're afraid of losing your job, he'd say, okay, let's walk through that, slowly, not to panic, but to prepare. Imagine the feelings, the setbacks, the next steps. And then, oddly enough, when you stare the fear in the face, it loses some of its teeth. We do this instinctively sometimes. You've probably said, what's the worst that could happen? But Seneca made it an art. And unlike your anxious brain, he wasn't interested in spiraling. He was interested in stability. The candle flickers. You imagine him dipping his quill again, writing, pausing, then scribbling out a line with frustration. He's not perfect. Stoics never claimed perfection, just effort. And here's something fringe you probably didn't know. Seneca also tried to study meteorology using philosophy. Yes, he actually wrote Natural Questions, where he attempts to explain lightning, earthquakes, and comets using logic and a healthy amount of guesswork. Spoiler, he got most of it wrong. But hey, A for effort. Back in the villa, you notice the candles getting lower, pooling wax around the base like time melting. You take a breath and lean back. What does Seneca say about wealth? A lot, actually mostly, that it's fine to have money, as long as it doesn't have you. You smile. He'd be amused by how many YouTube ads promise inner peace for just $39.99. But his point stands. Use your wealth, don't worship it. You can enjoy a soft bed, a warm bath, or even a midnight snack. Just don't stake your happiness on any of it. Seneca called this preferred indifference, things that are nice to have, but don't define your virtue. It's like saying, sure, I like oat milk, but I won't lose my mind if I have to drink the regular kind. You glance out at the courtyard again. The rain's still falling, slower now, like the sky is finally exhaling. In his final days, Seneca reportedly composed his thoughts with the same kind of calm he preached his whole life. There's something haunting and beautiful about that. You think, could I do the same? Could I meet fear not with bravado, not with panic, but with composure, with some candlelit letter of my own that says, I knew this would come. I'm not shaken. Of course, you're not planning your farewell. You're planning your sleep. But in a way, that's the same practice. Letting go, unclenching, accepting that the world will spin without your input for the next few hours. Let it, Seneca would approve. You feel the floor again beneath you, smooth stone, cooled by the air. The kind of stillness you can't fake outside. The rain thins to a whisper. Inside, you don't need to move. The scrolls will wait. The fire might go out. But your peace doesn't need tending. It's already here. The night deepens. Somewhere in the villa, the fire gives a final sigh and collapses into ash. But you don't need it anymore. The warmth you feel now is quieter, internal, like a thought that's made peace with itself. You wander through a shadowed corridor, your bare feet brushing cool mosaic tiles. Faint moonlight cuts across the floor in patches. Outside, beyond the archways, the rain has stopped. Only dripping echoes remain off rooftops, down gutters. Like time itself losing momentum, you step into another room and suddenly the air feels heavier, scented with leather, iron, and earth. It's a tent now, not a villa. You've walked into a Roman military encampment. The air trembles with the quiet breath of soldiers asleep. Their armor hangs on wooden racks, their spears stacked like arguments waiting for a spark. But at the center of it all, seated on a folding stool with his back to a dim lantern, is a man writing in a battered notebook. Marcus, Aurelius. Yes, that Marcus, the philosopher emperor, a man who ruled the Roman Empire while quietly reminding himself every night that power meant nothing if he couldn't master his own mind. Historians still argue whether Marcus ever meant meditations to be read by anyone but himself. It was more like a diary scribbled between battles, in freezing tents, surrounded by people calling him divine. And yet he kept reminding himself, page after page, that he was just a man, a speck, a soul on borrowed time. Tonight he looks tired. There's mud on his boots and a deep crease between his brows. But his pen moves steadily, his posture upright, like he's trying to write himself into alignment again. You move closer. He doesn't look up. He just murmurs, almost to himself. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, simple, brutal, and frankly a little unfair when your main moral accomplishment today was not yelling at your browser for freezing. But Marcus didn't mean it as a guilt. He knew how hard it was. He lived through plague, war, rebellion, loss. He watched friends betray him and his own children die. He ruled an empire with a chronic illness and a heart that probably longed for philosophy over politics. And still, he didn't whine. He wrote. He wrestled. He reminded himself, you are not your titles. You are not your body. You are not your inbox. You are what you choose to do with this breath, and the next one, and the next. One of his meditations hits you like a soft slap when you arise in the morning. Think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Why does that feel both inspiring and accusatory? You sit across from him. He doesn't mind. In fact, you get the feeling he wants the company not to teach, but to witness, to show you what it means to keep showing up. Here's something. Fringe. Marcus Aurelius also once wrote about meditating on the cosmos and imagining your own insignificance within it as a path to clarity. So if you've ever had an existential crisis looking at the stars, congratulations, you're doing Stoicism. He believed in something called cosmopolitanism, not the magazine, obviously, but the idea that we are all citizens of the universe, that every person is part of one great, tangled body, like cells in an organism. So when you help someone else, you're helping yourself. When you hurt someone, it rebounds through the system. He wrote this during a time when most people didn't even consider slaves to be fully human. That's what makes his writings feel ... weirdly modern, like he's reaching through time with a grimy, calloused hand and saying, yeah, I know, it's messy, be kind anyway. Marcus wasn't always warm and fuzzy, though. His writing is often blunt, even cold. But underneath it is this steel thread of compassion, the kind that's earned, not assumed. Like he's seen too much suffering to be sentimental, but not enough to give up on people entirely. He once wrote, if it's endurable, then endure it. If it's not, then stop complaining. Oof, that's not exactly bedtime story material. Unless you find comfort in tough love. But maybe you do. Maybe you're tired of the softness. Maybe part of your soul wants someone to say, "You're stronger than this. Get up," but not yet. Not now, now. It's time to lie back and let go, because Marcus didn't just talk about discipline and duty. He also believed in rest. He wrote about eutimira, kind of inner calm, a steady flame that doesn't flicker no matter how wild the storm. You picture it now, a little lantern hanging in his tent, glowing quietly through wind and worry, and then, just like that, goes out. The emperor rises, stretches his back, and walks into the dark. You're alone again, but not really. His words remain like echoes, like armor left behind for you to try on. You lie down on the cool ground, your head resting where his had rested. You feel the pulse of the earth beneath you, the same one Marcus felt, the same one that will carry you into sleep. You've survived. Another day, and somehow you're still intact. Not perfect, not whole, but present. And that's enough for tonight. The night deepens. Somewhere in the villa, the fire gives a final sigh and collapses into ash, but you don't need it anymore. The warmth you feel now is quieter, internal, like a thought that's made peace with itself. You wander through a shadowed corridor, your bare feet brushing cool mosaic tiles. Faint moonlight cuts across the floor in patches. Outside, beyond the archways, the rain has stopped. Only dripping echoes remain off rooftops, down gutters, like time itself losing momentum. You step into another room, and suddenly the air feels heavier, scented with leather, iron, and earth. It's a tent now, not a villa. You've walked into a Roman military encampment. The air trembles with the quiet breath of soldiers asleep. Their armor hangs on wooden racks, their spears stacked like arguments waiting for a spark. But at the center of it all, seated on a folding stool with his back to a dim lantern, is a man writing in a battered notebook. Marcus, Aurelius. Yes, that Marcus the philosopher Epictetus, a man who ruled the Roman Empire while quietly reminding himself every night that power meant nothing if he couldn't master his own mind. Historians still argue whether Marcus ever meant meditations to be read by anyone but himself. It was more like a diary scribbled between battles in freezing tents, surrounded by people calling him divine. And yet he kept reminding himself, page after page, that he was just a man, a speck, a soul on borrowed time. Tonight he looks tired. There's mud on his boots and a deep crease between his brows. But his pen moves steadily, his posture upright, like he's trying to write himself into alignment again. You move closer. He doesn't look up. He just murmurs, almost to himself. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, simple, brutal, and frankly a little unfair when your main moral accomplishment today was not yelling at your browser for freezing. But Marcus didn't mean it as a guilt. He knew how hard it was. He lived through plague, war, rebellion, loss. He watched friends betray him and his own children die. He ruled an empire with a chronic illness and a heart that probably longed for philosophy over politics. And still, he didn't whine, he wrote, he wrestled. He reminded himself, you are not your titles, you are not your body, you are not your inbox. You are what you choose to do with this breath, and the next one, and the next. One of his meditations hits you like a soft slap when you arise in the morning. Think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Ugh, why does that feel both inspiring and accusatory? You sit across from him. He doesn't mind. In fact, you get the feeling he wants the company not to teach, but to witness, to show you what it means to keep showing up. Here's something. Fringe, Marcus Aurelius also, once wrote about meditating on the cosmos and imagining your own insignificance within it as a path to clarity. So if you've ever had an existential crisis looking at the stars, congratulations, you're doing Stoicism. He believed in something called cosmopolitanism, not the magazine, obviously, but the idea that we are all citizens of the universe, that every person is part of one great, tangled body like cells in an organism. So when you help someone else, you're helping yourself. When you hurt someone, it rebounds through the system. He wrote this during a time when most people didn't even consider slaves to be fully human. That's what makes his writings feel ... weirdly modern. Like he's reaching through time with a grimy, calloused hand and saying, yeah, I know, it's messy. Be kind anyway. Marcus wasn't always warm and fuzzy, though. His writing is often blunt, even cold. But underneath it is this steel thread of compassion, the kind that's earned, not assumed. Like he's seen too much suffering to be sentimental, but not enough to give up on people entirely. He once wrote, if it's endurable, then endure it. If it's not, then stop complaining. Oof. That's not exactly bedtime story material, unless you find comfort in tough love. But maybe you do. Maybe you're tired of the softness. Maybe part of your soul wants someone to say, you're stronger than this. Get up. But not yet. Not now. Now, it's time to lie back and let go. Because Marcus didn't just talk about discipline and duty. He also believed in rest. He wrote about euthymera, kind of inner calm, a steady flame that doesn't flicker, no matter how wild the storm. You picture it now, a little lantern hanging in his tent, glowing quietly through wind and worry, and then just like that it goes out. The emperor rises, stretches his back, and walks into the dark. You're alone again, but not really. His words remain like echoes, like armor left behind for you to try on. You lie down on the cool ground, your head resting where his had rested. You feel the pulse of the earth beneath you, the same one Marcus felt, the same one that will carry you into sleep. You've survived. Another day, and somehow you're still intact. Not perfect, not whole, but present, and that's enough for tonight. You wake, or rather drift into a new part of the night, still with the Stoics, still in ancient Rome, but somewhere quieter now, earthier. You're in a kitchen, not the Instagram kind with marble counters and backlit spice racks. This one is cramped, stone walls, a low, uneven ceiling. The air is thick with the smell of lentils, stale bread, olive oil, and wisdom. A single pot bubbles on a clay stove, and someone is stirring it with deep, deliberate focus. You recognize the figure, not by face, but by presence. It's the kind of person who has seen too much and complains too little. You sit on a rickety bench, and the warmth from the stove finds your bones before you even realize you were cold. This is the Stoic kitchen, the place where philosophy isn't debated, but boiled, where ideals are chopped fine and added to the stew, and where the only seasoning is simplicity. Tonight's recipe, frugality, patience, and just a sprinkle of perspective. Because here's the secret the Stoics knew. You don't need much. In fact, the less you need, the freer you are. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, ate so simply that people joked his grocery list could fit on a pebble. Historians still argue whether this was from conviction or necessity, but either way, it stuck. The Stoics weren't fans of extravagance, not because they hated joy, but because they knew that joy based on stuff is always on shaky ground. You take a slow breath. The stew smells good, maybe lentils with a hint of garlic. Nothing fancy, but it fills the room like a hymn. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Oof, that one lands. Because let's be honest, probably known moments where you had everything you needed but still felt unsatisfied. The craving sneaks in for more success, more comfort, more likes, and suddenly the richness of life gets replaced with the chase. The person across from you ladles stew into 2 chipped bowls and slides one your way. There's no toast, no garnish, just sustenance. You take a bite, it's warm, it's real, it's enough. You notice a basket in the corner, half a loaf of hard bread, a few olives, and what appears to be a very determined beat. This isn't poverty, this is intentional limitation. The Stoics weren't trying to punish themselves, they were training to be okay when things are stripped away. Seneca used to do poverty rehearsals. He'd spend a few days sleeping on the floor, eating crusts, wearing rough clothes. Not because he had to, but to remind himself that he could. That if life took everything tomorrow, he'd survive. Sounds dramatic, but honestly, kind of genius. You think, when was the last time I practiced going without? Not as a punishment, but as a test, a curiosity. A reminder that I'm not as fragile as my coffee order might suggest. Here's a fringe tidbit. The Stoics sometimes compared life to a banquet. You're not the host, you're a guest. Take what's passed to you. Don't snatch. Don't sulk if the platter skips you. Eat with grace, leave with gratitude. And speaking of banquets, fun fact, ancient Romans used fermented fish sauce called garum on practically everything, even fruit. So next time someone questions your pineapple pizza, just tell them you're following classical culinary tradition. You glance around the kitchen again. There are no gold utensils, no marble sinks, but there's something richer here. Peace, because this is where Stoicism lives. Not in perfect routines or ideal circumstances, but in the practice of enough-ness. You realize that the stew isn't just stew. It's a metaphor, okay, it's stew. But also a metaphor for contentment simmered over time, with ingredients that don't impress anyone but satisfy completely. You remember what Epictetus said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. And here you are, full, sleepy, safe. The room hums gently with night sounds. A rat scurries in the corner, respectfully avoiding your side of the room. You raise your bowl in salute. It's a Stoic rat. Probably has a philosophy podcast. The person across from you, whoever they are, sips from their bowl and finally speaks. Everything you need is here, they say, not as a command, not as some motivational poster, just a gentle reminder. Because the Stoics weren't ascetics. They didn't hate pleasure. They just refused to be owned by it. If it comes, great. If it goes, you're still okay. You place the empty bowl on the floor and stretch your legs. The fire flickers lower. The kitchen fades a little at the edges. You could sleep here, right here, in the place where virtue is stirred with wooden spoons and quiet choices. You don't need silk sheets. You don't need your favorite podcast. You don't even need dessert. You have the night. You have your breath. You have this moment, full and warm, like a bowl of lentil soup on a quiet Roman night. And really, what more could you ask for? You wake or float to a darker part of the Stoic dreamscape. The warmth of the kitchen has faded, replaced by a crisp, salt wind and the sound of waves crashing far below. You're standing at the edge of a cliff now, overlooking the remnants of a ruined Roman port. It's not a dramatic, cinematic ruin. No thunderstorm, no torchlight. Just time, doing what it does best, wearing everything down, grain by grain. You step carefully along the edge. There's a collapsed colonnade to your left, half-buried mosaics to your right, and in between them, broken pottery shards peek up through wildflowers. The past doesn't beg for attention, it just is, quietly fallen apart. And yet, even here, something in you feels strangely intact. This is where you come to learn the next part of the Stoic code. How to build a soul that doesn't crumble when the world does. Disaster-proof peace. Not the kind you get from spa days or motivational slogans. The kind that holds steady through real loss, real grief, real unraveling. Because if the Stoics had a motto, it wouldn't be good vibes only. It would be, let's make peace with reality, shall we? You kneel near a chipped amphora, now home to a stubborn weed. It's kind of beautiful, actually, this tiny ecosystem growing in what was once someone's wine jug. The wind picks up. You wrap your cloak tighter, not just against the cold, but against the memory of your own personal ruins. We've all got them. The job that disappeared, the friend who stopped calling, the version of yourself you had to let go of. The Stoics never promised you'd avoid loss. They promised you could survive it. They called it apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense, but freedom from passions that twist your judgment. It's like emotional insulation. You still feel things, but they don't drag you down with them. You stay upright. You stay ... You remember something from Marcus Aurelius. Whatever happens to you has been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. Historians still argue whether he really believed in fate or just used it as a psychological tool, but either way, the effect is grounding, calming, like standing on the bones of something ancient and still saying, I'm okay. You wander toward what used to be a bathhouse now, just a few sunken stones and a patch of ferns. A place where people once came to cleanse themselves, socialize, gossip. Now, it's just earth reclaiming its space. And oddly, that's comforting. Nothing lasts, not the empires, not the gossip, not even the mistakes. You breathe that in, maybe. Your past doesn't need to be fixed. Maybe it just needs to settle. Like ruins under moss. There's a kind of freedom in that thought. You're not failing just because something ended. You're not broken just because you've suffered. You're simply ... human. Part of a long line of people, trying to hold it together under the pressure of existence. And here's a strange but delightful tidbit. Some Stoics used to wear coarse clothing on purpose, or go barefoot in winter, not as some emo flex, but to build resilience. They called it voluntary discomfort, like testing your emotional roof to make sure it doesn't leak in the real storm. You smile. Your own roof has definitely leaked a few times, emotionally and literally. You sit down on a mossy ledge, legs dangling over the cliff. Below, waves slam. Ancient stone steps that once led to ships, trade, lovers waving goodbye. Now, seagulls, wind, nothing else. But even that, the silence, the sea, the decay teaches you. The Stoics didn't look away from tragedy. They studied it. They collected stories of people who endured plague, exile, betrayal, loss, not to glorify suffering, but to show it could be survived without collapsing into bitterness. Seneca again, a gem cannot be polished without friction. nor a man perfected without trials. You reach into your pocket, okay, metaphorically, and pull out your own ruin. That one thing you've been quietly carrying. Maybe it's fresh. Maybe it's ancient. Either way, you lay it down here, among the stones, not to forget it, but to give it a resting place. Let it be part of the landscape, not the thing blocking. Your path, that's what Stoicism offers, not avoidance, but perspective. Like saying, yes, this happened, yes, it hurt, but I'm still here, and I'm still me. You rise slowly. The wind tugs at your sleeve, almost playfully. You feel different, not stronger, exactly, but clearer, like the sediment of your own thoughts has settled to the bottom of a still pool. A part of you understands now why Marcus wrote his journal every day, not to inspire others, but to recalibrate himself, to remember what really mattered and what didn't. You think, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could write one line each day, even if it's just I'm still breathing, because that, too, is a victory. You begin to walk back, the ruins behind. You glow gently in the moonlight, like someone left the past on a low setting just for ambience. You don't rush. The path is uneven, but your steps feel earned, like you've passed through some quiet initiation, the kind that doesn't require applause, just peace. The path leads you away from the coast, into a narrow alley of shadows and soft light. Stone gives way to soil. The wind becomes still. You're not sure how far you've walked or how time has bent, but now you're in a courtyard, small, walled. Quiet in the center stands a rusted iron cage. Inside it, a bird. A little grey one, not exotic, not flashy, just a creature that flutters its wings every now and then, as if testing memory more than escape. You stand still. There's no lock on the cage. The door hangs open, but the bird doesn't leave, and somehow, in that moment, you understand the next Stoic lesson. Freedom isn't a place, it's a mindset. You sit on a nearby bench, splintered wood, warmed by a day that's already slipped away. Across from you, in a shadowed doorway, someone watches, lean, lined face. Maybe old, maybe just weathered by truth. They nod slightly, as if to say, so, you've arrived. You know without knowing, this is someone who has known confinement, who has lived through cages far less visible than iron, because Stoicism isn't just for emperors in silk robes and villas with libraries. It thrived in prisons, in exile, in work camps. In fact, one of the most celebrated modern Stoics was James Stockdale, American pilot shot down over Vietnam, who survived 7 years of brutal captivity. He credited Epictetus with keeping his mind intact while his body was broken. Historians still argue whether his captors ever realized how mentally invincible he had become. But Stockdale said it plainly. He couldn't control his pain, but he could control whether he gave up his integrity. That's the power of Stoicism when it's stripped of books and quotes and turned into muscle, into breath, into choice. The bird shifts in the cage again, still doesn't leave. You start to wonder, what cages do you live in? The job title you think defines your worth. The relationship you stay in because leaving would disrupt the illusion. The beliefs you cling to, even when they hurt. Stoicism whispers, what if the door is open and you just haven't walked through it yet? But here's the trick, it doesn't force you out. It just points and says, you're allowed. Even if you don't leap, even if you just sit and notice the opening. That's already a kind of escape. You think back to Epictetus's dichotomy of control. The cage isn't just built of steel bars. It's built from false assumptions, like, I can't be happy unless things go my way, or I'll finally be at peace when everything is perfect. The Stoics would laugh softly at that, probably over dry lentils. They'd say, peace is already possible. Not when the chaos ends, but when you stop needing it to. Here's a quirky tidbit to chew on. Ancient Stoics believed even laughter could be an act of philosophy. If you can laugh at your pain not cruelly, but knowingly, you've reclaimed power. So yes, even the bird gets to laugh, in its own chirpy way. You notice now that the bird isn't unhappy, it isn't desperate, it just is, breathing, perched, watching the sky without chasing it. And that might be the most stoic thing in the world, because the goal isn't to fly away from everything hard. The goal is to be free even when you can't fly. You reach out and touch the metal of the cage, warm, smooth in some places, jagged in others, kind of like life. The figure in the doorway finally speaks, voice low, sandpaper and kindness. You can't control the world, they say, but you can control how you move through it. That's it. That's the Stoic skeleton key. Not control, not dominance, direction. You close your eyes. In the darkness behind them, you see the cage again. But this time, it's different. It's made of words, of expectations, of fear. And with one breath, a real, deep breath, you begin to see cracks in those bars. Places where the light gets in. You're not trapped, you're deciding. And that, the Stoics would say, is the only freedom that ever mattered. The bird chirps once and hops closer to the door, not escaping, just noticing. Same as you. Stone arches frame your next steps as you drift into the marketplace, the Agra silent under moonlight. The merchant stalls are all closed, their goods tucked away beneath linen wraps and leather cords. No sense of cinnamon or dried fish. Tonight, no clamor, no bargaining, no pickpockets slipping between philosophers and fishmongers. Just the soft shuffle of your own steps, and the echoes of thought that seem to hang in the air like fog. This is where Zeno taught, not in a lecture hall or temple, but here, in the busy swirl of bodies and opinions, right in the center of commerce, drama and bad pomegranate deals. You pass the old stone where he supposedly stood, Zeno of Citium, father of Stoicism, leaning against a column while Athens buzzed around him like a drunk wasp. He didn't shout, he didn't even demand silence, he just spoke. About virtue, about reason, about how none of this, he gestured vaguely at everything, can disturb your peace unless you let it. It's strange, isn't it, that the seed of one of history's most resilient philosophies was planted in a marketplace, not a mountaintop, but that's Stoicism for you. No isolation required. You can be wise and have to haggle over grapes. As you stroll further, the echoes of debate rise like mist. Some phantom argument about whether virtue alone is enough for happiness floats your way. You can almost hear Cleanthes grumbling about its Zeno's successor, a man who, legend says, worked nights hauling water just to afford to think during the day. Historians still argue whether Cleanthes ever slept or just swapped buckets for books around 3 a.m. You pause at a dry fountain, lean against the rim. The marble is cool against your back, and your breath makes little ghosts in the air. The question lingers in your mind now. What does virtue even mean here? In a modern life, you're not a toga-wearing Athenian debating metaphysics over olives. You're, well, you. Probably with a phone that buzzes too much and a mind that won't shut up. But the Stoics wouldn't ask you to give up modern life. They'd ask you to show up better in it. Virtue, to them, wasn't about being nice or pious or squeaky clean. It was about alignment with reason, with nature, with truth. Being internally sturdy, even when external life is chaos. Kind of like wearing emotional noise-cancelling headphones. The real test. Not when things are calm, but when the person in line ahead of you at the bakery orders 6 complicated drinks and a custom gluten-free croissant, while you're already late. That's your agora moment. The Stoics say, breathe, pause, ask yourself, is this within my control? If the answer is no, let it go like expired hummus. A breeze swells trash gently past your feet, a crumpled parchment, a fig stem, someone's long-gone ambition. You watch it spin and settle. Zeno would have loved this part, the randomness of it. He believed that fate logos, the reason woven into the universe, moves like this, chaotic but purposeful. And your job is to respond well, to choose dignity over drama. And yes, people back then were just as dramatic. Athenian life was full of gossip, rivalries. And did you hear what that Epicurean said about Chrysippus? Moments, here's a fringe tidbit. Chrysippus, one of Stoicism's great minds, is rumored to have died laughing at a donkey eating figs. No, seriously, that's one version of his death. He saw a donkey steal some figs, cracked a joke about giving the donkey wine to wash it down, and then laughed himself into the afterlife, which proves 2 things. Even Stoics have a weird sense of humor. Even the wise die in absurd ways. You move again, your sandals brushing across mosaic tiles that once saw blood, argument, love, and bored teenagers. There's a feeling growing in you, now not certainty, but something quieter. A kind of steadiness, like standing in the middle of a crowd and realizing you don't need to shout to be whole. Because here's what Zeno taught, and what the marketplace proved. You don't have to escape life to live it wisely. You don't need a monastery, just awareness, just practice. Every time you respond instead of react. Every time you accept instead of resist. Every time you notice that your inner peace isn't for sale, not even on market day. You look around. The agora remains empty, still, but now it feels full of decisions waiting to be made. Not about what to buy, but about who you choose to be. You walk a little taller now. The breeze feels less sharp. Behind you, a soft voice drifts across. The stones, almost inaudible, walk as if the world belongs to no one, and your soul belongs only to you. The sky rumbles, a low, distant growl. You glance up, not startled, just aware as heavy clouds muscle in above the agora's rooftops. Somewhere beyond the sleeping city, a storm is throwing a tantrum. It's not raining yet, but the kind of electric stillness in the air warns you it's coming. The same way a bad mood creeps in before you even realize it's been sitting beside you all day. Your path takes you east now, toward the ancient heart of Stoic thought, the Stoa portico, the painted porch, once a masterpiece of color and philosophy, now barely a skeleton of columns, its murals long gone peeling away like old opinions. But it's still standing, mostly, and on a night like this, with thunder cracking its knuckles in the clouds, the porch feels alive. You step beneath the colonnade just as the first drops patter down. Not a deluge, yet just a gentle spitting, like nature testing its aim. The stone beneath your feet is slick. A breeze pushes its way through the open corridor, carrying with it the scent of wet earth, memory, and maybe a little drama. This is where the name Stoicism was born. Not in a book or scroll, but right here, under this shelter stoa meaning. Porch, the irony. A whole life philosophy forged not inside some sealed ivory tower, but out in the open, where weather, people, and pigeons could interrupt you at any time. That's the point, though. You're not supposed to wait for the perfect conditions to think clearly. You practice clarity amid the conditions. Mid-storm, mid-conversation, mid-mess. Thunder cracks louder now. A flash of lightning follows, throwing your shadow long and crooked across the stone wall. It makes you wonder how the Stoics weathered their own storms, literal and metaphorical. Zeno lost his fortune in a shipwreck and called it a blessing. Historians still argue whether he actually meant it or just needed to save face. Either way, the lesson landed. Things happen, you respond. Preferably with grace. Lightning, again brighter this time. You flinch slightly, but catch yourself. Epictetus would be unimpressed. Some things are up to us, he'd say, and some things are not. Lightning, not up to you. Flinching. Arguably not either. But your reaction after the flinch. Fair game. The painted porch once boasted. Vivid images of mythic battles. Greeks fighting Amazons. Heroic deaths. Epic courage. It's said Zeno chose this space because of those paintings. Because they reminded everyone of the chaos humans bring upon themselves, and the power they have to rise above it. Imagine trying to teach virtue to a group of bored students while next to you a larger-than-life mural of someone getting stabbed in the gut. That's commitment. That's Stoicism. And speaking of commitment, remember how Marcus Aurelius, general philosopher, wrote, "Meditations not in comfort, but while camped on battlefields, surrounded by soldiers with lice and spears." He weathered both external storms and the internal downpour of existential dread. Like when he wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Comforting, huh? But weirdly, it kind of is. The Stoics didn't sugarcoat anything. Life is hard. People disappoint you. Toilets overflow. Sometimes the storm does destroy your roof. But if your peace depends on sunshine, then your peace is doomed. Another flash. This time the thunder follows almost instantly. You huddle closer to the wall. Water starts dripping from the ceiling, trickling down one of the mural fragments that survived 2,000 years. A damp reminder. Nothing lasts forever. Temples, not storms, not even your worst thought spiral. Here's a quirky side note. Cleanthus, one of Zeno's successors, once claimed that the entire universe is a living being made of divine fire. And reason. Fire, yes. Reason. Debatable. Especially when you consider the average Tuesday in traffic. But fire made sense to them. It symbolized both destruction and renewal. The Stoics believed that the cosmos regularly burned itself down, only to rise again in a perfect, rational cycle. Sort of like your inbox. They called this ekpyrosis universal combustion. The big crunch, ancient Greek edition, and just like that, you realize, storms have their place. They cleanse, they clarify, they expose weak structures. Emotionally and architecturally, the wind howls through the stoa now, testing your resolve. A pigeon flaps frantically past, drenched and irritable. For a second, you think about how miserable it must be to have wings and no weather app. You wrap your arms around yourself, not because you're cold, but because the Stoics would nod at this. You take responsibility for your own warmth, your own peace. A merchant's cart tumbles in the street below. Wooden wheels rattle against stone, then stop abruptly against a statue of Athena missing her left arm. You wonder how often that statue has watched storms like this pass by. More importantly, how often has she not reacted? That's the trick, isn't it? To be like Athena stoic, unbothered by wind or wine or the weight of centuries. Not because she doesn't feel, but because she chooses what to show. The mask isn't fake, it's discipline. You listen to the storm settle into its rhythm, no longer unpredictable, just present, like your breath. Inhale, exhale. The thunder fades, but the lesson lingers. You're still here, still dry, still intact. And when the winds come again, because they will, you'll remember the porch, the way it held firm, the way it whispered, let the sky scream. You're built to outlast it. The storm has passed. What's left now is the silence, thick, almost velvet, except for the slow drip of rainwater sliding from roof corners to cobblestone. You step back out from under the porch, breathing in the post-tempest air. It's cooler now, cleaner, somehow. And you're still thinking about that stoic stillness, not the statue kind, but the kind that lives inside your ribcage, like a quiet roommate, as you walk. Your feet make soft splashes in puddles, reflecting broken moonlight. There's a tug, somewhere behind your chest, like a sigh you haven't released yet, something old and unsluted. Maybe it's time. You reach a small garden, tucked between two crumbling walls. It wasn't on your route, but it draws you in. There's a worn marble bench near the middle, and you sit, running your fingers along its chilled edge. Overhead, leaves rustle with residual drizzle. The garden smells like rosemary and damp soil, earthy and grounding, in the center of it all. Resting like a forgotten centerpiece is a weathered object. At first it looks like a helmet, then a bowl, then yes, a skull, human, clean and unceremoniously placed. Probably a leftover from some faded ritual or philosophical display. Either way, it's there now, watching the sky. You lean forward, not out of fear, but curiosity. Memento mori, remember that you will die. A little intense for a midnight garden, maybe, but you're already here, and honestly, it's not as morbid as it sounds. If anything, it's comforting. Weird, right? See, the Stoics didn't obsess over death to scare themselves. They invited it in like an awkward dinner guest. Come in, death. Sit at the table. Don't mind the crumbs. Because when you make peace with the end, the middle gets a whole lot lighter. Marcus Aurelius used to write reminders to himself in meditations, like do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. That's right. Most powerful man still had to coach himself out of procrastinating. He wasn't tweeting memes about productivity. He was literally journaling. Dude, you could die tomorrow. Stop doom scrolling and finish that speech. Historians still argue whether the Scalondisk practice placing a visible death symbol nearby was popular among Stoics, or just a later interpretation. Either way, the message echoes clearly. Don't wait to live like life is temporary. It already is. Funny thing though. You're probably closer to peace with this idea than you think. You've already survived thousands of tiny deaths, versions of yourself that no longer exist. The you who once cried over a lost toy. The you who sent awkward texts in the wrong group chat. The you who didn't know better, then did. Each version got you here, and each one, in its own way, died with grace. A breeze moves through the garden, and the skull seems to grin. Quirky fact time. The philosopher Heraclitus, not a Stoic, but adjacent in the misery-sipping category, believed everything was in flux, that you could never step in the same river twice, which is just a poetic way of saying you're not the same person you were yesterday, and also you probably forgot to update your passwords. Even the Stoics, who loved order, logic, and predictability, had to admit this. Life changes constantly. People leave, bodies weaken, markets crash, pets die, bread molds, empires fall. But you know what stays? The way you choose to meet each moment, that inner stance, that quiet refusal to be shaken by every gust of fate. It's easy to forget that when things feel urgent. That's why the Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the art of imagining the worst-case scenario before it happens. You picture losing your job, your favorite mug, your entire group chat turning against you, not to invite misery, but to build resilience. If you've already accepted the loss in your heart, then when it happens, well, it stings less. You've rehearsed it. You're not surprised. You think of Seneca now, who once wrote to his friend Lucilius that death is not to be feared, but rehearsed. Let us prepare our minds, he said, as if we'd come to the very end, and not in a dramatic funeral music kind of way, but in that you just realized you have 20 minutes before a deadline. Sort of clarity. You look back at the skull. It isn't trying to threaten you. It's inviting you to be awake, to be here, to stop scrolling mentally through the past and future, and actually take in this exact breath, in this exact garden, under this exact slice of moon. There's something gentle in that, something weirdly freeing. You smile to yourself, a little sheepishly, because, let's be honest, modern culture hates this topic. We Botox it, distract it, meme it to death. But when you sit still with the idea, when you realize that your story has an ending, makes every page more meaningful, like how a short song is sweeter, or how the last bite of cake always tastes best. Across the garden wall, a shadow passes, maybe a cat, maybe just your imagination. You half wonder if it was a sign, then shake your head. The Stoics didn't deal in omens. They dealt in reason, reflection, and a good night's sleep. Still, it feels right to nod to the skull as you stand, not out of reverence, exactly more like respect. A quiet acknowledgement between fellow travelers. You take one last look at the bench, the wall, the little sprigs of rosemary dancing in the breeze. Then you step back into the open path, shoes damp but soul somehow lighter. You won't live forever, but you are living now, and tonight that is more than enough. You walk a little slower now. The air has shifted, again less of that garden hush, and more of a dry wind rolling in from the west. The sort of wind that hints something big is coming. Or maybe something big already happened. Up ahead, the sky glows faintly red. Not sunrise, not sunset. This is a Rome on fire sort of red. The color of embers that still crackle under broken columns. The kind of heat that melts marble into memory. You move toward it, careful and deliberate. Each step lands softer than the last. Not because you're afraid, but because ruins deserve reverence. This was once a thriving district. Brick facades, arched temples, laughter and loaves and lecture halls. Now, char, rubble, a few standing pillars that look like teeth in a crumbling jaw, and ash, so much ash, still warm, like the world hasn't quite finished its tantrum yet. Marcus Aurelius probably walked these roads once. Maybe not this exact one. Historians still argue whether the emperor ever truly walked among the common folk when Rome's back caught fire, but he saw cities collapse. He saw invasions, betrayal, plague. And despite all of that, he still wrote, "The universe is change. Life is opinion." Opinion, that's what stuck with you. Not fate, not destiny, not divine punishment or cosmic alignment, just opinion. The internal filter you apply to the things outside your control. Marcus watched his empire burn and reminded himself, it's not the fire, it's how I choose to see the fire. You stop walking and squat down beside a pile of scorched scrolls. You brush the soot away. The parchment is half gone, but a few letters remain. Maybe poetry, maybe philosophy, maybe some angry tax collector's complaint about grain rations. Doesn't matter now, and yet it does. Because even in this dust, something lingers. The echo of an idea that maybe nothing truly vanishes if you absorb its lesson before it fades. You stretch your legs and lean against a sun-warmed rock. There's comfort in this devastation. Strange comfort, but real. Because here, surrounded by the aftermath, you realize something. The worst has already happened, and yet you're still breathing. The Stoics didn't teach you to avoid disaster. They taught you to face it so many times in your imagination that, by the time it arrives, you nod at it like an old friend who's late to dinner. You scooch over, pat the bench, and say, "Took you long enough." Seneca himself knew this. He once lost his fortune, got exiled, and basically got ghosted by the political elite. His response? He wrote essays on how none of it ever really belonged to him anyway. He framed his ruin as liberation, like he'd just been unfollowed by every burden in his life. Quirky fact, during the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD, the one that buried Pompeii in ash, Stoic-inspired Romans were reportedly calmed. The very end, archaeologists even uncovered a man lying peacefully with a writing tablet, maybe trying to get his last thoughts down as the sky collapsed. Was it bravery, delusion, acceptance? Historians still argue whether it was a Stoic mindset or simply resignation. Either way, that tablet remains his last moment, frozen in volcanic grace. You tilt your head, listening. No sirens, no voices, just wind and the occasional crackle of shifting beams. It's eerily like today's news cycle. One catastrophe after another, all blurring together in the feed. War, climate, heartbreak, collapse. It never stops. And somehow we keep scrolling. But you're not scrolling now. You're sitting still. You're letting the burn settle around you. You're looking into the flame without letting it devour you. That's the Stoic way, really. Not to avoid emotion, but to befriend it, to sit down beside grief, fear, anger, and ask them questions, like you're both at a midnight diner booth. So, what are you really trying to tell me? The Stoics knew that when the world feels like it's ending, that's often when clarity begins. You lie back now on a slab of warm stone, letting it cradle your spine. Bits of sky peek through broken rooftops, stars trying to muscle their way through the haze. You let your breathing slow, matching the rhythm of cooling embers. Nearby, you think about what it means to live in a collapsing world. And the answer is unexpectedly gentle. It means you love harder. You laugh when you can. You hold your own hand sometimes. You say no to things that don't matter and hell yes to the ones that do. You water your plants. You turn your phone off for an hour. You tell someone you miss them. You stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be real, because the world will keep burning in some way or another. It always has, but you can. Be the calm in the middle of it. You can be the whisper that says, I'm still here, and I'm okay. A cinder drifts down, dancing like a firefly before it touches your sleeve and vanishes. You smile. The universe is change. Life is opinion. You rise slowly and step over a charred threshold. Whatever was here, whatever was lost, is part of you now. The ashes don't stick, but the wisdom does. And just like that, you walk on lighter than before. You step away from the ruins, letting the hush rebuild itself behind you. There's a new kind of silence now, not the eerie stillness of collapse, but the intentional quiet that wraps around you like a warm coat at midnight. It's the kind of silence you start to choose rather than endure. Up ahead, a little grove of cypress trees leans in close. Their tall silhouettes look like old monks whispering secrets to each other. And in the distance, voices, not clear ones, just vague, half-heard, babble familiar tones of gossip, complaints, petty judgments floating through the dark like lazy bees. You don't walk toward them instead. You follow a narrow path that curves to the side. Pebbles crunch beneath your sandals. It's okay, let's be honest. You're probably in sock sand. Each step feels like a decision, a gentle defiance, because right now you're learning to honor the sound of not caring. Not in a cynical way, not in the burn it all down, teenage rebellion kind of way. This is quieter, softer, like you finally realize that most of what people say has more to do with them than you. The Stoics were big on that. Epictetus especially. He taught that if someone insults you, you don't have to accept it like someone trying to hand you a dead fish. Just don't take it. Let them stand there holding their weird, smelly opinion all by themselves. Historians still argue whether Epictetus ever actually threw a metaphorical dead fish at someone during a lecture, but the idea holds. You're not responsible for other people's noise. You're responsible for your reaction to that noise. You pause near the edge of a fountain dry now, but smooth and echoing. It used to be a public gathering place. Merchants, philosophers, drunk poets reciting verses about how grapes are the meaning of life. The usual dot. But as you sit on the ledge, you imagine what it would be like if everyone just paused, stopped talking for a second, stopped filling the space with knee-jerk opinions, social media hot takes, and secondhand stress. The Stoics weren't afraid of silence. They loved it. Seneca once said, "It is a great thing to know the season for speech and the season for silence." Most people remember the speech part. Fewer remember the silence part. But you're leaning in now, letting silence bloom inside you like a night flower. Here's something fun. The ancient Stoics often trained themselves to not react immediately. Someone would insult them or try to provoke them, and they'd just stare, unbothered, emotionally bulletproof. Like that unshakable grandma who never flinched even when your cousin tried to light the carpet on fire. Epictetus again, he used to warn his students about fantasy. Those sudden impressions or thoughts that pop up and try to hijack your mood. The trick wasn't to fight those thoughts, but to notice them. Like, oh, hey, random anxiety spiral. Nice of you to drop in, mind waiting outside. You run your fingers over the edge of the fountain, cool stone, worn smooth by centuries of elbow-leaning and impromptu debates. The voices in the distance are louder now. Someone's arguing about bread prices, or maybe whether Jupiter prefers goats or doves. Ancient problems, modern flavor. But you stay still. Stillness, you realize, is a kind of rebellion in a world that's always talking, always reacting. Your calm becomes a secret weapon. Your ability to pause, to observe, to let the chaos ping off your emotional armor like hail off a roof. That's Stoic gold, and sure, it's hard. You're human. You have opinions. You have buttons. Sometimes you read a comment or get a text and you want to launch into full TED Talk mode. But the Stoics would nudge you gently and say, don't, let it pass. Respond later, or never. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every fire needs your oxygen. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient Roman households used to keep little wax tablets by the door for quick note-taking grocery lists, appointment reminders, emotional venting. Archaeologists even found one with a child's scribble that reads in rough translation, "I hate Titus, he stole my fig." So yeah, drama isn't new. But now, imagine if the kid who wrote that had waited an hour, slept on it, maybe even wrote a second note. Figs grow on trees. Let it go. That's the vibe. You push yourself up from the fountain and start walking again, slower now. Not tired, just tuned in. The wind is quiet. The trees hum with nighttime stillness. A cat pads across your path and disappears into the shadows. Doesn't say a word, smart cat. There's a final lesson here, one you feel in your bones. Dignity isn't loud. Self-respect doesn't perform. Inner peace isn't a group chat. It's here with you. In the space between reactions, you reach a low stone wall and climb up just enough to see the rooftops below. Some candlelight, some laughter, but mostly darkness and stars. You let your shoulders drop, your face soften, and your breathing settle into a slower rhythm. The world keeps talking, but tonight, you don't have to answer. Your foot finds the first worn marble step, and down you go gently, slowly, toward a quieter corner of the villa. The floors creak a little, tiles grown with age, and every now and then, a breeze sighs through the curtains. But otherwise, the scene is still. And the next task, folding laundry, yes, laundry. Even ancient Romans wore clothes, mostly togas, tunics, and the occasional cloak that doubled as a blanket. And guess what? They had to fold them, too. Which means you, here in this dreamy intersection of midnight and mindfulness, are about to experience the full Stoic discipline of doing something beautifully boring. Your fingers brush over linen. The fabric is cool, gently stiff from drying on a line. You lift a toga, letting it unfold in the air like a white sail. Somewhere in the background, a slow drip of water echoes from a forgotten basin. And that's your soundtrack. Domestic, humble, real. The Stoics would have loved this moment. Especially Cleanthes' successor, who insisted that philosophy was something you practiced while walking, eating, working, and yes, folding laundry. Historians still argue whether Cleanthes wrote his hymns to Zeus while ironing his tunic. Probably not, but they agree on this. He believed daily life was the arena of the soul. There's no stage here, no applause, just the creases you smooth with intention, and the breath you exhale as you gently align corners. What you're really doing is practicing discipline in motion. The Stoics called this proheresial rational faculty, your ability to choose your reaction and your attitude, even toward a wrinkle, even toward a stubborn sock. You finish the toga and place it on the pile. Next, a child's tunic. Small, thin, probably worn by a boy who once tried to sneak figs into the courtyard. You imagine his little footsteps echoing down the hallway. Maybe he grew up to be a scribe or a soldier, or maybe he just got really good at folding things. Routine, the Stoics taught, is not your enemy. It's your rhythm. It's the slow drumbeat of virtue made visible. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself daily of what he had to do, who he needed to be, even when it was repetitive, annoying, or mundane. Especially then, because repetition, stripped of novelty, is where your values get tested. And tonight, your value is presence. The ancient Stoics didn't do multitasking. They didn't scroll Twitter while folding. They didn't half listen to lectures while organizing togas. They put their whole selves into whatever they were doing, which is, let's be honest, kind of revolutionary in a world where most of us can't even drink water without checking our notifications. You pick up a dark blue cloak. It's heavier than the rest and smells faintly of smoke and myrrh. Whoever wore this had stories. Maybe a soldier returning from the frontier. Maybe a philosopher returning from a disappointing symposium. Maybe a widow wrapping herself against a chilly Roman evening. The cloak doesn't say, but as you fold it, you feel connected, not just to the person, but to a practice, to the quiet dignity of caring for things, to the philosophy that says, what you do with your hands matters just as much as what you do with your thoughts. Quirky tidbit: in ancient Rome, some households hired professional folders called fullers, part laundry specialists, part fabric whisperers. They even used urine, yes, really, to clean togas. And while we don't recommend that in your own laundry routine, it does suggest something wonderful, that even the lowliest tasks had expertise, care, and stoic relevance. You pause, stretch your back, and sip from a clay cup of lukewarm tea. It's a little bitter, that's fine. Everything tonight is supposed to be gentle, slightly imperfect, and grounded. Back to work. A stack of napkins now, well, more like squares of rough cloth used for wiping hands during dinner. You fold each one neatly, thinking about Epictetus telling his students to begin with little things. If you can handle folding napkins with grace, maybe you'll be ready when life asks something bigger. That's the thing, life will ask something bigger. Someone will test your patience, or your boundaries, or your grip on a slippery soap bar of inner peace. And when they do, you'll have this night in your bones. You'll remember that even when the task seems small, your spirit can be vast, calm, capable, because folding laundry is not a waste of time. It's training, a kind of midnight dojo for the soul. Each crease you press is a quiet lesson in virtue. Each soft stack of linen is a soft stack of perspective. And the moment you catch yourself speeding up, wanting to be done, wanting to get back to something that feels more important, you smile, slow down, and remember, this is the important part. The Stoics didn't teach a philosophy of escape. They taught one of engagement, of choosing meaning inside the mundane. And if folding laundry teaches you to slow down, to care, to keep your thoughts tidy, well, you've already won the night. You place the last piece of fabric on the pile and inhale deeply. The room smells of lavender and candle wax. Your hands are warm. The breeze through the curtains whispers, well done, and now. You rest, not because you earned it, not because you finished something, but because rest is part of the rhythm, too. The candle sputters low, casting long shadows that flicker like memories against the villa's stone walls. You move toward a quiet corner, where an oil lamp glows with a softer flame. There's a stool, here slightly uneven, but just stable. Enough for a moment of stillness. You sit, and then you notice it. A folded letter beside the lamp, sealed with wax and scribbled in the neat, melancholic hand of Lucius Annaeus Seneca. It smells faintly of old olive oil and tears. Tonight Stoicism turns its full face toward love and lost to emotions it never pretended to conquer, only to coexist with. And you, warm and tired, are finally ready to hear what Seneca had to say when his heart was broken. He wrote, famously, to a woman named Marcia, grieving her dead son. He told her not to suppress grief, not to fight it, but to shape it like a river redirected, not dammed. Stoics didn't believe in denying sadness. They believed in giving it structure. You feel that now as your hand grazes the edge of the letter, its parchment curled with time. Why do we grieve? He had asked. Because we loved, simple, tragic, and wise. The flame bends, low and golden, as you breathe in slowly. Seneca's own life was full of grief. He lost a son, possibly two. Historians still argue whether his marriage was political or romantic, but what's certain is that he understood longing. And he understood what happens when the world takes something. You thought you couldn't live without and yet, somehow, you keep living. That's where Stoicism gets misread. People assume it's about indifference, emotional shutdown, becoming some kind of ancient robot with a good jawline. But real Stoics, they felt, they loved deeply. They just refused to let loss destroy the part of themselves that could still do good. You lean back. The oil lamp makes a small glop sound. Your body is warm, but there's a cold corner in your chest. Just a little sorrow that's never fully gone. And that's okay. You remember a friend you lost, or a version of yourself that no longer exists, or a love that went quiet. These memories rise gently, like steam, not to haunt you but to be witnessed. The Stoics never said grief was failure, only that letting grief unmake your reason was unwise. Still, the pain is real. Epictetus once compared the loss of a loved one to the breaking of a cup. He said, "When you kiss your child goodnight, whisper to yourself, they are mortal." Brutal, maybe, but strangely freeing, because the point isn't to detach from love, it's to love so clearly, so presently, that when the time comes to say goodbye, you're not shocked that good things don't last forever. Under the villas beams, you listen to silence. Maybe there was a time you curled up after a loss and thought you'd never feel whole again. Maybe you're still in that moment years later. But if you're here now, breathing deeply, folding the memory into a part of yourself that's not raw anymore, that's a kind of miracle. Quirky tidbit. Roman funerals often involved professional mourners, women hired to wail publicly, tearing at their cheeks and garments. It was considered healing, cathartic, even necessary. But the Stoics skipped the performance. They grieved inwardly, quietly, sometimes for months, sometimes forever. They didn't chase closure. They accepted continuation. You run your finger along the edge of the letter again. You think about how Seneca faced his death not from old age, but from forced suicide at Nero's command. He bled slowly, surrounded by friends, and even in that moment he comforted them, quoting philosophy while his breath grew shallow. Stoicism, in that moment, wasn't armor. It was grace. Tonight, that grace wraps around you like a soft wool. Cloak, your sadness is still yours, but it's not raging anymore. It's listening. The villa sighs. Somewhere outside, a nightbird calls. And for a moment, you imagine Marcia's son young, laughing, running through the courtyard with a fig in one hand and his mother's scarf in the other. She still grieves, but she also remembers the way he smelled after rain. And that too is Stoicism, to remember with tears and still choose to rise. You shift in your seat, the lamp flickers. You look around at the folded letters, the quiet shadows, the way your breath fogs the air slightly in this cooler part of the room. All these things pass, and still you are here, not untouched, but unbroken. You murmur to yourself, "What is not within my control, I release. What is mine, I carry with calm hands." You don't have to force healing. You only have to allow space for it. You stand, and in that moment, just one moment, you feel deeply what the Stoics always knew. That peace isn't the absence of emotion. It's the gentle discipline of holding emotion without letting it drown you, and if you still miss them, that's proof you were alive. That's proof you loved. The lamp is down to its last whisper of flame, barely glowing against the stone walls of the villa. You rise from your seat and glide toward the open archway. Cool air brushes your skin. Outside, the night stretches long and wide, and somewhere in the distance, you hear the slow hush of the Tiber River. It calls to you not loudly, not urgently, but like an old friend who never asks much. You follow. Your sandals press softly into the dirt path, and the moon casts its silver net across the earth. Olive trees sway gently, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. You walk without rushing, because you finally understand there's nowhere urgent to be. Not when you've spent the night peeling back the layers of a philosophy built not for ivory towers, but for quiet lives. For yours, the Tiber glistens in the moonlight, as serene as any Stoic would hope to be. And here, at its banks, you finally feel it, that stillness they spoke of. Not silence, not numbness, but a calm presence. You sit by the water's edge. It doesn't matter that it's a little damp, or that a bug crawled across your foot 2 seconds ago. You just let it be. And now, with this long night nearly behind you, you take a slow breath and reflect. The Stoics weren't dreamers. They weren't utopians. They were survivors of the real world. Fires, wars, exile, betrayal, heartbreak. They'd seen it all. Marcus Aurelius ruled during plague and invasion. Epictetus lived as a slave. Seneca taught wisdom to a boy who would become one of Rome's cruelest tyrants. And still, they practiced calm. Not because life was kind, but because life was chaotic, and they refused to match its chaos. You remember one of Marcus's softest lines. He wrote, "If you are disturbed by external things, it is not they that trouble you, but your judgment of them." He didn't mean you should gaslight yourself into fake positivity. He meant, choose how you frame things. Choose which fires you feed. And here, by the river, there are no fires, just water, just reflection. You lean back into the grass, feel the dampness through your clothing, and let out a small, sleepy laugh. This whole journey, all these ancient scrolls and weathered voices, and, somehow, the final lesson was just to lie still and breathe. Historically, the Tiber has seen it all: Rome's rise, its violence, its poetry, its trash. Some scholars even debate whether Romulus really founded the city by these waters, or if the myth just sounded better with a river in it. But none of that matters to you now. You're here, and time, for once, is kind. You trace a finger along the blades of grass beside you. The stars above blink slowly, like they, too, are growing sleepy. And you remember something Epictetus once said: "No great thing is created suddenly. Even the grape must ripen to sweeten." You, too, have ripened, not into some perfect being, but into a person who can sit quietly beside the river and not need answers to everything. A person who has grieved and loved and failed and still finds something sacred in a deep breath. You smile faintly, and maybe, just maybe, there's someone watching over you right now, friend. A version of yourself from long ago, or even the quiet echo of an ancient philosopher, nodding in approval. The river flows. The grass sways. Your eyes get heavier, and with each blink, the teachings of the Stoics soften into your bones not as commandments, but as gentle reminders. You don't have to control everything. You don't have to be unaffected. You only have to return, again and again, to what you can actually shape: your breath, your focus, your kindness. Let the rest go, and as you do, the night embraces you fully. No more candlelight, no more letters to unfold, just the sound of water and wind, and your own steady pulse easing into rhythm. Peace was never the absence of feeling it. Was this you, still, quiet, alive? Now, drift deeper. The air around you thickens with calm, every sound melting into that gentle blur of near silence. The river hums, low and long, just barely louder than your breath. You don't need to move. There's nothing left to unpack. Nothing you need to do to earn this rest. Everything you carried into the night, the worries, the noise, the endless alerts from a world always hungry for attention, can fade now. Not vanish, just dim. Your limbs grow heavy. The grass beneath you feels like velvet, and even the stars seem to yawn, their light stretching slower across the dark. If a thought rises, don't fight it. Let it float through and keep moving. Like the river, like time. Let everything glide. Let your body exhale. Let your mind loosen. Let your heart, full as it is, settle into stillness. This peace, you didn't have to chase it. You simply had to remember it was always here beneath the noise, beneath the stories, beneath even the pain, waiting, patient, kind. The Stoics were never promising perfection. They were offering a quiet room in your soul. You're in it now, and it's safe, it's soft, it's time. Good night. Now, drift deeper. The air around you thickens with calm, every sound melting into that gentle blur of near silence. The river hums low and long, just barely louder than your breath. You don't need to move. There's nothing left to unpack. Nothing you need to do to earn this rest. Everything you carried into the night, the worries, the noise, the endless alerts from a world always hungry for attention, can fade now, not vanish, just dim. Your limbs grow heavy. The grass beneath you feels like velvet, and even the stars seem to yawn, their light stretching slower across the dark. If a thought rises, don't fight it. Let it float through and keep moving. Like the river, like time. Let everything glide. Let your body exhale. Let your mind loosen. Let your heart, full as it is, settle into stillness. This peace, you didn't have to chase it. You simply had to remember it was always here beneath the noise, beneath the stories, beneath even the pain, waiting, patient, kind. The Stoics were never promising perfection. They were offering a quiet room in your soul. You're in it now, and it's safe, it's soft, it's time. Good night.